Hey, hi, and welcome to Taste of Fusion. Today my menu is inspired by my guest, who is fantastic and a vegetarian, well, almost a vegetarian, she says. But I decided to go the whole hog with her. So I started off with a fantastic take on aloo ka bharta. So it's a lovely little fusion piece served to you with some camembert on the top. For my main course, a medley of aubergines and other vegetables coming together with a puff pastry covering. And for dessert, well, I'm making an apple cheese crumble. Enough of this talk now. I've got to go pick up my veg, get back to the kitchen and get cooking. Right, now to get started, and today I'm doing everything topsy-turvy. That means I'm starting off with dessert, which is a fantastic little cheesecake fusion bit. Now to get started. First things first, I'm going to get my pan on a high flame, and then I'm going to heat up some butter. So, about half a pat of butter. Very quickly, move it around. And just before it goes translucent, turn the heat off. And I'm going to pop in one entire packet of digestive crumbs. Mix this up very, very quickly. Make sure everything is well coated with the butter. Once the butter has been incorporated and sort of mixed through very well, I'm just going to get something to set it in. And today, I've decided to use this lovely little jello mold only because it's got these glorious little ridges and it'll look very attractive when it comes out. So, first step, just fill the base of the jello mold with some of your crumb, like so. And make sure you pat it down really well. Make sure it's really tightly set in. In another pan, on a high flame, I have some fantastic, lovely green apples over here. And I'm going to pop about an apple and a half, which I've diced, into my pan without any butter or oil, straight in. Next, I'm going to add in 3 tablespoons of sugar. Now, this process takes a little time. You've got to wait for the sugar to dissolve and actually cook the apples through. You want the apples to become quite soft so you can incorporate them in cream cheese, which means you'll also have to let this sort of emulsion cool down before you do that, because if you don't do that, cream cheese will let out its own oil, which will ruin the dessert. Now I can smell the aroma of the apples hitting me already, which I know means that the sugar is allowing the heat through to start cooking the apples, which means in my next step, when I add in about 3 tablespoons of water, there's going to be a lot of steam. And you have to keep repeating this process once the water dries up, and you will have to do this about 3 to 4 times. Okay, the apples are almost ready. I've added water about 4 times. That means I've put in almost half a liter of water. And everything's dried up beautifully. It's going golden brown around the edges, and my apple is very, very soft. Now, very quickly, I'm just going to turn the heat off. And into the apple, I'm going to pop in 1.5 teaspoons of gelatin powder. And this will help hold the cream cheese together because we're not cooking it in the oven. So you have to ensure that the cheese cannot, it doesn't break apart basically. Next step. Instead of sugar, I decided, how about a little condensed milk? And of course, this will give a completely unique flavor to this dessert. And whilst the pan is still hot, I'm just going to add in about 6 tablespoons of condensed milk. Okay, now mix it up. Make sure it becomes really nice and gooey, and smush your apples a little bit because it'll help them, blend in with the dessert. To add in a nice large pinch of red chili flakes, and that looks so gorgeous already. The red chili flakes will only help accentuate the sweetness in this dessert. I've got some lovely cream cheese here from a packet. I'm just going to put in half a packet's worth. Mix this up. You can see it's turning into this lovely sort of smooth mix, and you keep stirring through, and it doesn't matter if your apple's breaking up, because once your mixture is lovely and smooth with bits of apple sticking out, you finally move on to finishing the second step. Now, 1 large tablespoon worth of the mixture into your biscuit crumb, which has been set now in the mold. There we go. Now, for the final step. Bring back your biscuit crumb, which is now slightly cooled, and that's all right because it'll take the warmth from the central filling to set. And just layer it on top, like so. Now, it's super simple. This has to go into a fridge and set till serving time, and that's it. We are done with dessert. Now it's time to move on to our main course. Right, now to get started, my main course. Today I thought, let me use some puff pastry. Now that's quite difficult to make at home, but in today's modern age, you can pick it up in the grocery store. So I have some lovely little puff pastry here. Now what I'm going to do with that is use that as a topping of my little bake. And what's my bake going to consist of? Well, that's going to be a fusion, a medley of so many lovely things. I've got some fruit in there, I've got some aubergine because that's in season, and of course I'm taking a little inspiration from an aubergine dish that's made with amchur or khatai powder. But first things first, we've got to get our vegetables ready. Now for that I have some fantastic tomatoes here, and I'm going to pop about 3 tablespoons into my large bowl. Now I've diced up the tomatoes quite finely because I want them to break down very quickly in the oven, and of course create a lovely little paste which will add to the tanginess of this dish. In go my tomatoes. Next I'm going to put in some gorgeous little baby aubergine. Now this, in its original form, is used in the recipe as I mentioned before. It's usually slit in the middle and then filled with khatai powder and baked in the oven. But we're not going to do that today. Again, I've got some lovely aubergine that I've diced up. I'm going to put in about 4 tablespoons into my bowl with the tomatoes. Next, with my medley of vegetables, I thought, how about a little fusion? Bring a little Mediterranean into the, into the fray here. And I've got some sweet corn, baby corn, that I'm just popping in, and that's about 3 tablespoons, which I've diced up again. And the same with some onion, 3 teaspoons of white onion, diced finely. Next, some fantastic color, I say. I've got these, I've got this gorgeous yellow pepper here, again, which I've diced up, 2 teaspoons of that. And some red pepper as well, again, 2 teaspoons. So just add to the crunch in there, and of course, give you a different dimension of flavor. Now, for our spicing of this. I'm going to pop in 1 teaspoon of garlic, which I have diced very, very fine, and you must do that because you don't want big chunks of garlic coming in your mouth. It's going to be quite awful if that happens. Next, for our spices, I'm going to put in 1 teaspoon of salt, 1½ teaspoons of the khatai powder, 1 teaspoon of red chili flakes, a pinch of turmeric, so less than ¼ teaspoon, some coriander seeds, 1 full teaspoon of whole grain mustard. Next, just mix it all up. Okay, for the next step, I've got some olive oil here, and I'm going to pour in about 3 tablespoons worth of, about 2 tablespoons of red grape vinegar, 1 teaspoon of sugar. And then I'm going to squeeze in the juice of 1 whole lime. Now limes are in season right now. You can of course use lemon as a substitute. It's the same thing, except the lime gives you a more mellow, a well-rounded flavor. So the juice of 1 lime. Next, I'm going to add a different texture to this mix, and I'm going to put in about 4 teaspoons of cottage cheese. There we go. Mix this up again, but you don't have to blend in the cottage cheese completely. Okay, and now the last thing. From on top, I've got these glorious little artichoke hearts here, so I'm just popping them in, and I'm going to put in about 4 or 5. Okay. Now, gently just turn them in to the mix. Next step, get a little ramekin that can go into the oven. Fill it up with this glorious, glorious mixture. Okay, now for the last step. Here I have this lovely puff pastry that I just picked up. I'm just going to take off a little side of it, like so. And so I'm going to use my hand and I'm going to flatten it out. And I'm going to keep flattening it out and turning it on its side. Bring it together again, centrally. Make a circle. What you're aiming to do is get a large flat circle. Lovely sort of lid for this dish is complete. Now I'm just going to layer it over the ramekin like so. Just let it sit. Don't worry about the edges that are coming off. Push it in from the sides slightly so you've got a little indent. Make sure it's patted down. And with a fork, just make little holes so steam will escape. And this goes into a preheated oven for about 35 minutes. Right, so that's in your oven. Now one thing, your oven is preheated to 140 degrees for about 10 minutes prior to your little puff pastry, sort of puff pastry bake going in there, and it's going to cook for 35 minutes. So now I'm going to wait for that to come out, but I'm going to get started with the appetizer. Right, now for our appetizer, which is a fusion take on aloo ka bharta, or basically fried potatoes. But the difference here is that I've already had the potatoes boiled and I'm going to fry them again. So it's a little funky fusion for you. First things first, let's get our potatoes out of the bowl. I've got 5 medium-sized potatoes here, which I'm just going to roughly chop. Okay, now these roughly chopped potatoes go into my bowl. So, next, I have some lovely little mushrooms, which again I sliced up, and I'm going to take about 6 sliced mushrooms. I'm just going to roughly chop them again using the same knife. Nothing too fancy because they'll break down. And here is a little fusion element where I'm adding mushrooms into what is technically aloo ka bharta. So in they go into the bowl. 1 tablespoon of white onion that's been diced finely. In that goes. And here I have some sliced ginger, so 1 tablespoon of sliced ginger, which again I'm going to roughly chop just to make sure it cooks very quickly and lends its fantastic smokiness. Now for some spices. The khatai powder. 1.5 teaspoons of that, 2 teaspoons of red chili flakes, 2.5 teaspoons of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric, 1 teaspoon of coriander powder, and we are ready to fry this up. Okay, now to get things moving along very, very quickly, I'm going to get my pan on a high flame, and I'm going to pop in about a 1/4 pat of butter, so that's about 60 grams. Melt it all up very quickly. Now, as the butter starts to melt, I'm just going to pop in all the ingredients as I did layer and spice together. So in they go. Just get them frying very quickly. Keep stirring vigorously because you've got to have all the spices fry at the same time. Make sure everything is coated well. And you have to keep cooking this dish till the potatoes have completely broken down. Once your potatoes are cooking well, just add in the juice of half a lime. Mix it all up. And then for the olive oil. 2.5 tablespoons of olive oil to keep everything lubricated and the dish cooking with the same intensity. And some red grape vinegar and about 4 tablespoons of that. Now this entire process takes about 15 to 20 minutes. You have to keep stirring, but what I'm going to do is for my first burst of intense cooking, I'm going to add in 4.5 tablespoons of water and then very quickly cover my pan with a lid and turn the heat down low. Now I'm going to cook the potatoes like this for about 8 minutes and then return to the process. Right, it's been about 8 minutes and that's lovely. All the water's evaporated. I'm going to add in the rest of the butter. Mix that in. Now I'm going to squeeze in the juice of another half lime. Now, at this point, once all the butter's been absorbed, add in 1/4 more. And you have to follow these steps because this will keep your potatoes from becoming too oily or the butter being released in the end. Add in a pinch more salt. And right at the end, just going to turn the heat off, put the potatoes in the center of the pan, and put the lid on and let it cook in its own steam till I'm ready to serve. It's time to plate up. Right, we are sitting ready to eat a dusky supper and I'm joined by the fantastic Tammy Huck who has taken time out of her hectic schedule to come and join me.
I'm delighted to come and join you because I'm starving.
This is the appetizer, which is a fusion.
Can I eat it all? I just want to know, is it polite on television to eat everything?
You can eat it all and you can even have some of mine if you want.
It's rather yummy, by the way. In fact, it's better than rather yummy. It's very yummy. And it's super yummy.
It's just...
Hey, but it has something else in it. It has stuff in it.
Technically, it's 90% potato.
It's 90% potato, but that 10% has got a zing.
It's got a little ginger, some onion.
The camembert adds the zing.